Under the brutal summer sun of Redstone Creek, a young police officer raised her weapon, believing she was facing a threat to everything her town depended on. Across the ravine stood a former Navy SEAL, exhausted, silent, and carrying a truth no one wanted to see. Between them, a K-9 sensed something deeper than fear. What unfolded next would decide the fate of missing children, a dying river, and 3 lives bound by duty and choice. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from, and if this story moves you, please subscribe. The summer had settled hard over Redstone Creek, a small mountain town tucked into the eastern spine of Colorado. For weeks the sun had ruled without mercy. Hills once green now wore a dull bronze, and the air shimmered above cracked dirt roads like a living thing. The creek that gave the town its name had thinned to a narrow ribbon of water, precious and watched closely, its banks posted with warnings and patrol signs. By late afternoon, the heat pressed down so heavily it felt personal, as if the land itself were testing who would endure. Beyond town, where the last weather-beaten houses gave way to scrub oak and redstone cliffs, Officer Mara Langford stood at the edge of the ravine, sweat darkening the collar of her uniform. She was young, late 20s at most, but there was nothing tentative about her stance. Tall, lean, shoulders squared, she held her service pistol in a steady 2-handed grip, arms locked, eyes sharp. Her dark blonde hair was pulled into a tight, practical braid that brushed the back of her neck. Her face, lightly sunburned, carried the focused severity of someone who had learned early that hesitation could get people hurt. "Don't move," she ordered, her voice level despite the heat. "Step out slow, hands where I can see them." The man emerged from the brush exactly as instructed. He was tall, broad-shouldered, moving with deliberate calm, as though he understood how quickly a wrong motion could end things. He wore a faded gray T-shirt clinging to a muscular frame. Dusty cargo pants and worn boots stained the color of the canyon. His hands came up, palms open. Dark hair, cropped short, caught the sunlight, and his face, handsome in a rugged, unpolished way, was marked by exhaustion rather than fear. A faint cut had dried along his forearm, and darker stains marked the fabric near his shoulder. "I'm not armed," he said. His voice was low, steady, carrying the practiced control of someone used to being heard in chaos. "Name's Ryan Hale." At Mara's side, her K-9 partner shifted. Dakota was a full-grown German shepherd, black and sable, powerful and disciplined. His ears were forward, body taut, amber eyes fixed on the man. Heat had not dulled his alertness. He stood slightly ahead of Mara, not aggressive, but ready. "This is a restricted watershed," Mara said. "You're standing less than 100 yards from Redstone Creek. We've had reports of trespassing and sabotage." Her gaze flicked to the ravine below, where thin water glinted between stones. "What are you doing here?" Ryan swallowed once. "Looking for someone?" "People don't wander into protected land during a drought just to look," she replied. Her finger rested on the trigger, pressure controlled, deliberate. "We're in a heat emergency. That water keeps this town alive." Dakota stepped forward half a pace. He didn't bark. Instead, he lowered his head, nose working the air, circling just enough to catch Ryan's scent. His posture changed, not relaxed, but curious. He paused near Ryan's left side, inhaled again, then looked up at Mara briefly. The absence of a bark unsettled her more than aggression would have. Dakota was trained to react instantly to threats. "Dakota," she warned softly. The dog ignored the command. His nose brushed the stained fabric on Ryan's shoulder. Blood, old, dried, not fresh. Dakota exhaled, a low sound in his chest, but did not retreat. Ryan glanced at the dog, something like recognition crossing his face. "He's trained well," he said quietly. Mara's eyes narrowed. "You military?" Ryan hesitated just long enough to be honest. former Navy SEAL. That landed with weight. Redstone Creek was small. Outsiders stood out, and former Special Forces wandering near their water source in the middle of a drought raised every alarm she had. "I'm not here for the water," Ryan added quickly, "or your land." "Then start talking," Mara said. "Now." He took a slow breath, shoulders lifting, then settling. "A group of kids went missing 2 days ago. Teens. I was running a wilderness skills workshop for at-risk youth outside Durango. They broke off early, tried to cut through these canyons to get home faster. Storm cell passed north. I lost their trail near the ridge." "That's not our jurisdiction," Mara replied, though a flicker of concern crossed her eyes. Missing kids were never just paperwork. "I know," Ryan said, "but terrain doesn't care about county lines. I tracked them this far, found signs they were being followed." "By who?" "I don't know," he admitted, "but it wasn't random." Dakota sat down suddenly between them, solid and calm, as if placing himself deliberately in the line of tension. His back brushed Mara's shin, his shoulder nearly touched Ryan's knee. The dog's presence was grounding, almost symbolic, and Mara felt it. Her grip tightened, then eased a fraction. In town, miles away, Blake Morrell stood in the cool shade of his office, staring out at Redstone Creek through reinforced glass. He was in his early 40s, tall, well-groomed, with the easy confidence of a man used to getting his way. His light linen shirt was immaculate, sleeves rolled just enough to suggest casual authority. Blake's smile, when it came, was polished, but his eyes were calculating, always measuring. On his desk lay maps of the watershed, property lines traced in red ink. He had grown up poor, clawed his way into wealth, and now owned Morrell Development Group, a company hungry for water rights in a drying state. Redstone Creek was the last untapped source for miles. "They won't sell," his assistant said from the doorway, voice tight. "The town council's holding firm." Blake's smile widened slightly. "Everyone sells," he replied. "Eventually." Back at the ravine, the cicadas buzzed loudly in the heat, filling the silence. Mara studied Ryan's face again, the lines of fatigue, the steadiness that didn't match a liar's nerves. "You're trespassing," she said finally. "I could bring you in." Ryan nodded once. "I won't resist." Dakota remained seated between them, gaze shifting from Mara to Ryan, tail still. A bridge. Mara exhaled slowly, the heat, the drought, the missing kids, all pressing in. She lowered the gun just enough to rest it at a ready angle, not holstered. "You don't move without me," she said, "and if you lie to me—" "I won't," Ryan said. The sun dipped lower, painting the canyon walls red and gold. The creek below whispered faintly, fragile but alive. For a moment, none of them moved. Officer, soldier, dog. Balanced on the edge of choices that would shape the days to come. The Redstone Creek police station sat at the edge of town, a low concrete building bleached by sun and dust. Heat shimmered above the parking lot, warping the view of the surrounding hills. Inside, the air smelled faintly of old coffee, paper, and warm metal. A single fan rattled in the corner, pushing hot air from one side of the room to the other, without relief. Ryan Hale sat at the metal table with his hands folded in front of him, posture straight but not rigid. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, his fatigue showed more clearly. Dark shadows beneath steady eyes, a stiffness in his shoulders that spoke of long nights and harder memories. He had cleaned the dried blood from his shoulder at the sink when allowed, leaving behind a faint discoloration in the fabric. He did not ask for water. He did not pace. He waited. Officer Mara Langford stood on the other side of the glass, watching him through the narrow observation window. Without the drawn gun and open sky, she looked different, still composed, but more human. She had removed her hat, revealing loose strands of dark blonde hair escaping her braid, clinging to her temples with sweat. She rubbed the back of her neck once, then turned away. Dakota lay on the cool tile floor near her boots, head resting on his paws. His breathing was slow even. Every so often, his ears twitched toward the interview room, attuned to Ryan's presence beyond the wall. Sheriff Caleb Warren entered from the hallway, wiping his brow with a folded handkerchief. He was in his early 60s, tall but slightly stooped, with a weathered face that looked carved by decades of sun and disappointment. His uniform was immaculate despite the heat, badge polished, authority worn like an old habit rather than a weapon. "You ran him," the sheriff said quietly. Mara nodded. "Name's Ryan Hale, former Navy SEAL. Claims he's searching for missing kids." Warren raised an eyebrow. "Claims." She handed him a thin folder. Background came back clean. Too clean. Honors, commendations. Bronze Star with Valor. Discharged 4 years ago. The sheriff flipped through the pages, eyes narrowing. "Reason for discharge?" "Non-medical. Incident report sealed." Mara hesitated. "Loss of teammates." Warren exhaled through his nose. "That kind of loss doesn't stay sealed." Inside the interview room, Mara took a seat across from Ryan. The metal chair scraped softly against the floor. She set a recorder on the table, but did not turn it on yet. "You were decorated," she said. "Then you walked away." Ryan's jaw tightened. "I didn't walk away. I was done." "Why?" He looked at the tabletop for a moment, then met her gaze. "Because staying would have killed what was left of me." Mara studied him in silence. His voice hadn't wavered. No rehearsed speeches, no defensive edge, just fact. Dakota rose and moved closer, sitting beside Mara's chair. Ryan glanced at the dog, a corner of his, mouth lifting faintly. "He listens well," Ryan said. "He's trained to," Mara replied, "but he doesn't warm up to strangers." "He's not warming up," Ryan said gently. "He's evaluating." That earned a look from her, not suspicion, something closer to reluctant respect. A sharp crackle came from the radio on the wall. Then a voice, strained and urgent. "Dispatch to Redstone Creek PD. We've got a smoke sighting near the eastern ridge. Possible brush fire. Coordinates coming in now." Mara was on her feet instantly. She crossed to the window, eyes scanning the hills beyond town. From this angle, she couldn't see the ridge, but she could imagine it. Dry brush. Wind shifting. Ryan stood as well, though no one had told him to. "That area's all gullies and switchbacks," he said. "If there's smoke, it's not accidental." Mara turned slowly. "You sure about that?" "Yes." His voice was firm. "Fire moves uphill fast in this heat. Anyone lighting brush knows exactly what they're doing." The sheriff entered again, phone pressed to his ear, listening. His expression darkened. "Counties stretched thin. Volunteer crews are an hour out." Mara didn't hesitate. "I'm taking him." Warren stared at her. "He's still a civilian." "He's the only one here who knows that terrain better than my map," she said. "And if kids are out there—" The sheriff looked at Ryan, then at Dakota, who had already moved toward the door, tail low but ready. After a long beat, Warren nodded. "You stay with her. One wrong move, I put you back in cuffs." Ryan inclined his head. "Fair." They stepped back into the heat together. The sun hung low but fierce, turning the road into a ribbon of glare. As they crossed the lot, Mara noticed the way Ryan adjusted his pace to Dakota's stride, not crowding him, not ignoring him. When Dakota hesitated at the open door of the patrol SUV, Ryan waited without comment. That discipline stirred something in her she hadn't expected. As they drove toward the edge of town, the radio buzzed again with updates. Smoke confirmed. Wind picking up. Mara kept her eyes on the road. "My father died on that ridge," she said suddenly. Ryan didn't look at her, but his posture shifted, attention sharpening. "Wildfire?" she continued. 10 years ago, he was a volunteer firefighter. Went in when the wind changed. Didn't come out. I'm sorry, Ryan said. She nodded once, jaw tight. That's why I don't take chances with fire. Miles away, Blake Morrell stood on a dirt overlook, sunglasses shielding his eyes as thin gray smoke curled into the sky. Beside him, a stocky man with a shaved head and scarred forearms adjusted a fuel canister, his movements careless. Just enough, Blake said calmly. Let it spread. Let the town panic. The man grinned. And the water? Blake's smile was thin. The water will follow. Back on the road, thunder rolled faintly over the hills. Dry thunder, no rain promised. Mara slowed the vehicle as the dirt track narrowed, dust rising behind them. Ryan leaned forward slightly, eyes on the ridgeline. That smoke's too steady, he said. Someone's feeding it. Mara's grip tightened on the wheel. Dakota let out a low, focused whine. Ahead, the hills waited. Dry, silent, and ready to burn. The hills east of Redstone Creek rose in uneven folds of red rock and brittle scrub, their surfaces scarred by old runoff lines and fresh cracks from a summer that refused to give mercy. The air smelled of dust and resin, sharp enough to sting the lungs with every breath. Cicadas screamed from the brush, their chorus broken only by the crunch of boots and the soft padding of paws on dry earth. Mara moved first, rifle slung but ready, eyes scanning the slope ahead. Sweat traced a thin line down her spine beneath the vest. Behind her, Ryan followed with a steadiness that seemed almost effortless, reading the land as if it were a language he had never forgotten. Dakota ranged slightly ahead, nose low, tail level, working the ground in tight arcs. They found the tracks halfway up the incline. Small footprints, uneven and hurried, pressed into the dust where a patch of shade had preserved them. The pattern told its own story. Children trying to keep up, slipping on loose gravel, cutting too close to the edge. Mara crouched, fingers hovering just above the ground. At least 4, she said quietly. Maybe 5. Ryan nodded. They were running. Dakota stopped abruptly, ears snapping forward. He followed the trail uphill, then veered toward a cluster of juniper and scrub oak. There, half hidden by brush, stood a collapsed tent. Its canvas was sun-bleached and torn, one corner ripped clean away. A length of rope lay discarded nearby, fibers frayed. And cut. Mara straightened slowly. That's not something kids do. No, Ryan agreed. He stepped closer, eyes narrowing. Someone wanted them to move fast. Dakota pawed at the dirt near the tent, then gently lifted something in his mouth. He dropped it at Mara's feet. A strip of fabric, bright once, now dulled by ash. The emblem of a youth camp was still visible, edges charred. Fire? Mara said, a chill running through her despite the heat. The ground around the tent bore faint scorch marks, the kind that came from deliberate ignition, not accident. Ryan followed the signs with a practiced gaze, tracing a path that led away from the shelter and toward the steeper terrain beyond. They advanced carefully. The land grew harsher, the slope sharper, the ground fractured into narrow ledges and sudden drop-offs. At one point, the trail crossed a section where the earth had given way, leaving a shallow ravine hidden by brittle grass. Mara stepped forward, and the ground shifted. She felt it give before she saw it, a sudden lurch beneath her boot. Her balance broke, weight pitching forward toward the drop. A sharp breath left her throat. Ryan was there. His hand closed around her vest strap, muscles locking as he hauled her back with a force born of reflex. They hit the ground together, hard, dust blooming around them. For a second, Mara lay stunned, heart hammering. Then she realized she was alive and intact. Easy, Ryan said, already pushing himself up, eyes scanning for further collapse. She sat up slowly, pulse racing. You didn't hesitate. He met her gaze, expression unreadable. "You don't hesitate." Dakota pressed close, nosing Mara's shoulder, then Ryan's knee, checking both in turn. His tail flicked once, decisive, before he returned to the edge. Alert again. Something shifted inside her then. Trust, reluctant but undeniable. They moved on. The radio crackled suddenly at Mara's shoulder, the signal thin but urgent. "Officer Langford," a voice said. "This is Ellen Price. I run the feed store on Main." Ellen Price was in her late 40s, broad-shouldered, sun-leathered, the kind of woman whose calm held a town together in small, unseen ways. "I saw a truck," Ellen continued. "Belonged to Blake Morrell, dark blue, headed up the service road toward the ridge 2 days ago, loaded with gear. Didn't seem right." Mara's jaw tightened. "You're sure?" "Sure as the heat," Ellen said, and he wasn't alone. The transmission ended, leaving a hollow silence. Ryan looked toward the upper ridge. "He's using them," he said, "not just to scare the town, to make the land look dangerous enough to clear." Mara didn't answer, but her face hardened. She had spent years defending that land with rules and patrols. Now she saw the shape of something uglier beneath it. The trail narrowed as it climbed, funneled by rock walls that rose like broken teeth on either side. Wind whispered through the passage, carrying with it the faintest sound. A breath, maybe, or something closer to a whimper. Dakota froze. His ears tilted forward, body rigid, then he surged ahead, controlled but urgent. He stopped at the edge of a fissure in the rock, a deep cleft hidden by shadow. Mara knelt, peering down. "Hello?" she called, voice steady but loud enough to carry. A pause. Then, faint but unmistakable, a child's voice rose from below. Weak, frightened. "Help!" The sound echoed up the stone, thin as a thread. Mara closed her eyes briefly, relief and dread colliding in her chest. Ryan moved beside her, already assessing the depth, the angles, the loose rock. "They're alive," he said. Dakota lay down at the edge, head lowered, ears flicking toward the sound below, holding vigil. Above them, clouds gathered silently, the air heavy with the promise of something more than heat. Heat lingered even after the sun slid behind the ridgeline, the rocks holding warmth like coals that refused to cool. The cleft in the stone yawned open beneath them, a narrow throat plunging into shadow. From below came the sounds, thin, uneven breaths, a soft sob, a whisper of fear carried upward by a faint draft. The air smelled wrong here, dust, sap, and something sharper, chemical. Ryan didn't wait for instructions. He clipped the rope to his harness with practiced efficiency, fingers moving in quick, precise motions that spoke of long muscle memory. The cliff face was nearly vertical, fractured into knife-edged shelves and loose gravel that would shear away under careless weight. He tested the line once, twice, then swung his legs over the edge. Mara planted her boots wide and leaned back, bracing the rope against her hip. The strain pulled at her shoulders. She welcomed it. It gave her something solid to hold on to, while her mind ran ahead to everything that could go wrong. She kept her eyes on the rope, on the steady rhythm of Ryan's descent, and not on the dark below. "Easy," she called, keeping her voice calm. "I've got you." Ryan nodded without looking up, lowering himself hand over hand. Below him, the rock walls narrowed, pressing close like a vise. He found a shallow ledge and paused, angling his body to shield the line from a sharp outcrop. A child whimpered somewhere beneath him. Dakota stood at the edge, muscles tight. He let out a low, uneasy sound. Not a bark, not a growl. His nose worked furiously, drawing in the air. He sneezed once, then whined again, louder. Mara followed his gaze downslope and caught it too. The faint, unmistakable bite of gasoline. "Ryan," she said, tension creeping into her voice. "I smell fuel." Above the ravine, movement flickered between the rocks. Headlights flared and died as a truck idled behind scrub. A man stepped into view, stocky, mid-30s, shaved head reflecting firelight. His name was Kurt Vance, a hired hand with a heavy jaw and restless eyes, dressed in work boots and a flame-resistant jacket, too clean for honest labor. He carried a red canister, sloshing with every step, and wore a grin that never reached his eyes. Kurt crouched and tipped the can, tracing a shining line through dry grass. Another figure lingered behind him, taller, thinner, face hidden by a cap, fiddling with a lighter. Dakota's growl deepened, chest vibrating. Ryan reached the bottom of the cleft and found the children wedged between two slabs of stone, huddled close, faces streaked with dust and tears. 4 of them? Maybe 5? He spoke softly, steady as a metronome, using names he coaxed from them, promising nothing he couldn't deliver. "Look at me," he said. "One at a time. We're going up." He guided the first child into his spare harness, double-checking every buckle. Above, Mara felt the rope come alive in her hands as the weight shifted. She locked her stance and hauled, breath measured, ignoring the burn in her arms. The wind changed. Flames caught with a hungry whoosh, racing along the fuel line. Smoke boiled upward, thick and acrid, stinging Mara's eyes. Heat licked the rock face, turning the cleft into an oven. Mara moved without thinking. She dropped to one knee, rested her rifle against a stone, and sighted down the slope. Kurt Vance turned at the sound of the first shot. Too late. The round tore into the rear tire of the truck. Rubber burst with a sharp crack, the vehicle listing as air hissed out. Kurt shouted, scrambling back. The taller man lunged for the lighter. Dakota launched. He crossed the ground in a blur, a black and sable missile slicing through smoke. He hit the man square in the chest, jaws clamping onto a sleeve. The lighter flew, skidding across rock and vanishing into a patch of wet mud at the edge of a seep. The man screamed and fell, scrambling away, arm bleeding where teeth had grazed skin. "Dakota!" Mara shouted. Not a recall, but a warning. The dog broke off instantly, circling back to the edge, eyes bright, breath coming fast, tail low and ready. Below, Ryan freed the second child, then the third, working through smoke that pressed close and stole breath. He wrapped his shirt around a girl's mouth, lifted her carefully, and clipped her to the line. Each ascent felt longer than the last. Mara's arm shook. She set her jaw and pulled anyway. Through the haze and the crying, something settled between them. A shared rhythm, an understanding that didn't need words. Ryan looked up once, eyes meeting hers through smoke and sparks, and she saw it clearly then, not bravado, not recklessness, but a calm courage that refused to leave anyone behind. The last child clung to him, shaking. Ryan wedged himself against the stone, shielding the small body, as embers fell like angry insects. He waited for the rope to slacken, then clipped in. A crack split the sky. Lightning tore down nearby, white and violent, striking the ridge with a sound like the earth breaking. Wind surged through the ravine, a sudden powerful rush that shoved smoke sideways and flattened the flames. Fire bent away from the cleft. Its advance stalled, confused. "Now!" Mara yelled. She hauled with everything she had. The rope burned against her gloves. She didn't care. Hands reached over the edge. First the child, then Ryan. Dakota pressed in close, a solid wall of fur and muscle, as Mara dragged them clear. They collapsed onto the rock, coughing, laughing and crying all at once as rain finally began to fall. Big, heavy drops that sizzled on stone and turned ash to paste. Behind them, the fire guttered and retreated, robbed of its path. The night breathed again. Morning came gently to Redstone Creek, as if the land itself were exhausted from the night before. The heat was still there, waiting, but for a brief hour the air was cool enough to breathe without effort. Smoke hung in thin, broken ribbons above the hills, drifting away under a pale blue sky that looked newly washed. At the county line, patrol vehicles rolled to a stop one by one. Blake Morrell stood between two deputies, wrists cuffed behind his back. In the daylight, he looked smaller than he had the night before. His tailored clothes smeared with ash, his polished confidence cracked beyond repair. His light hair, once carefully styled, lay limp with sweat. He did not look at the hills. He did not look at the creek. His eyes stayed fixed on the ground, jaw clenched in disbelief. Behind him, his hired men were lined up in silence. Kurt Vance, the stocky one with the shaved head, glared openly at the dirt, rage simmering beneath his injuries. Two others avoided everyone's eyes, shoulders slumped, the bravado burned out of them, along with the fire they had tried to unleash. Officer Mara Langford stood a short distance away, uniform dusty, boots scorched at the edges. Dakota sat at her side, posture proud but calm, his shoulder bandaged where sparks had caught his fur. Ryan stood just behind them, hands resting loosely at his sides, face unreadable. He had not slept. None of them had. Yet there was a stillness about him now, a quiet settling as though something long unfinished had finally found its end. The truth moved fast through Redstone Creek. By noon, every storefront window carried the same murmurs. The missing children were alive. The fire was no accident. The water had been a target all along. Neighbors gathered in small knots along the sidewalks, faces drawn tight with anger and relief in equal measure. Some cried openly, others stood with arms crossed, staring toward the hills as if daring them to betray the town again. 2 weeks later, the courthouse overflowed. The Redstone County courtroom was old, its wooden benches polished smooth by generations of restless hands. Ceiling fans turned slowly, stirring warm air that smelled of paper, varnish, and sweat. Blake Morrell sat at the defense table in a borrowed suit that did not quite fit him anymore. Across the aisle, the prosecutor spoke with clipped precision, laying out evidence piece by piece, recorded communications, fuel receipts, witness statements, and photographs of the scorched ridge. Mara testified calmly, her voice steady as she described the gunfire, the flames, and the children trapped below. Ryan spoke next, his words spare, unembellished. He described what he had seen, what he had done, and nothing more. Dakota lay quietly near the aisle, head on his paws, eyes tracking every movement. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. When they returned, the room went silent. Blake Morrell was found guilty on all counts. The judge, a gray-haired woman with a voice as firm as granite, delivered the sentence without hesitation. 28 years in state prison, no parole. The charges followed one after another, each landing like a hammer: first-degree arson conspiracy, kidnapping of minors, armed assault, extortion of public resources, obstruction of justice. Kurt Vance and another direct accomplice received 16 years each. The remaining men were sentenced to terms ranging from 5 to 12 years, their roles weighed and measured without mercy. Blake did not speak. He only closed his eyes as the gavel fell, the sound echoing through the chamber like a door slamming shut. Outside the courthouse, the town gathered beneath the blazing sun. Someone started clapping. Then another. Soon the sound swelled, not loud, not triumphant, but steady, an acknowledgement rather than a celebration. Mara stood among them, Dakota pressed against her leg. She watched familiar faces move through the crowd: shopkeepers, ranch hands, teachers, parents of the children who now stood safe beside them. When she turned, Ryan was there, sunlight cutting sharp lines across his tired features. "We kept the summer," she said quietly. Ryan nodded. "You did." The next morning the creek looked different. The water ran clearer, catching light in a way it hadn't for weeks, as if freed from the weight of being watched, measured, threatened. Ryan knelt beside a small wooden footbridge near the bank, replacing a cracked plank with steady hands. The bridge had been damaged during Morrell's earlier survey work, left to rot as a warning. Now it took shape again under careful repair. Mara approached without sound, resting her hands on her duty belt. She watched him work for a moment before speaking. "You didn't have to stay." Ryan glanced up, a faint smile touching his mouth. "I wanted to." Dakota settled between them, tail thumping once against the dirt. He looked from one to the other, satisfied, as if his work here was complete. Later that afternoon, a small group gathered by the water. The fire chief, a broad-shouldered man named Thomas Reed, with soot permanently etched into the lines of his face, extended a hand to Ryan. "We could use someone like you," Reed said. "Fire season isn't done." Ryan shook his hand. "I'm not looking for medals," Reed smiled. "We're not offering them." Mara watched as Ryan accepted the position with a nod. When Reed turned to her, she spoke before he could ask. "He's joining the Rapid Response Unit," she said, "with Dakota." The creek flowed on, unbothered by plans or promises. It cut its way through stone as it always had, patient and unstoppable. As the sun dipped lower, casting gold across the water, Ryan stood beside Mara at the bank. The heat returned, but it no longer felt oppressive. Dakota lay at their feet, eyes half closed, at peace. Justice had come, not as thunder, but as something quieter. And in its wake, Redstone Creek breathed again. In life, the greatest dangers don't always arrive with warning sirens or raging flames. Often they begin quietly, in small compromises, in fear, in the belief that no one is watching and no one will stand up. But this story reminds us that courage still lives in ordinary places, in a woman who refuses to lower her weapon against injustice, in a man who keeps moving forward after loss, and in a loyal dog who never forgets who he is protecting. Every day we are given choices, to look away or to step closer, to protect what matters even when it costs us comfort, to believe that doing the right thing, quietly, steadily, can still change an entire community. If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who might need a reminder that integrity still matters and that second chances are real. Leave a comment below and tell us what moment touched you the most, or how this story connects to your own life. And if you believe in courage, loyalty, and hope that endures even in the harshest seasons, don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. Sometimes justice doesn't come with applause. Sometimes it comes with persistence, faith, and the courage to stay.